So solving equations is an equation is basically any expression that has a variable in it. So let's say, for example, x, and some numbers in it, and then it's got an equal sign and stuff on the other side. So to be an equation, different from an expression, is that you have to have an equal sign there. And when there's an equal sign, we ask you to solve, which means tell us what is the value of this variable. So what is the value of x? So x plus 5 equals 11. You can probably do this in your head and try to think of what number plus 5 is 11. So that number is 6. But when we use algebra, we're showing that thinking. So why would x be equal to 6? That's because the difference between 11 and this 5, what's left over, is 6. What we do with solving equations is we use the balance method. That means that whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. So if you want to isolate this x, get this x alone, what is the opposite of adding 5 to it? If we can do the opposite of adding 5, then we can get rid of this plus 5. So the opposite of adding 5 is subtracting 5. So what I do is I write the x plus 5 and then I subtract a 5. Okay, and there's my equal sign. Now, in order for the equation to be true, anything I do to the left side, I must also do to the right side. So if I subtract 5 on the left side, I have to also subtract 5 on the right side. We want this because adding 5 and subtracting 5, that's like nothing. That's like 0. That's like adding 0. Plus 5 minus 5 is like adding 0. Adding 0 is like doing nothing. So that leaves us with just the x by itself. And 11 minus 5 is 6. And that's the solution, x equals 6. So this is the simplest kind of equation. It's called a one-step equation. All we had to do was subtract 5 from both sides. Other one-step equations might have to do with dividing or multiplying. So let's say, for example, we have, I'll use a different variable, 2y equals 10. So 2 times something equals 10. You could probably do that in your head and know that 2 times 5 is 10, so y is 5. But how do we show this with algebra? What we'll do is we'll say 2 times some number is 10. That means that that number is half of 10, right? Because 2 of them together make 10. So to show that, I'm going to get rid of this 2. So what is the opposite of multiplying by 2? It's dividing by 2. So if I take this 2y, and this is how I show division, I show it like a fraction, the 2y divided by 2 is going to leave me with just a y. If I take a number and multiply it by 2 and divide it by 2, I'm going to get the original number. So remember what we said, we got to do the same thing to both sides. So here's my 10. If I take this 2y and divide it by 2, I also have to take the 10 and divide it by 2. On the left side, 2y divided by 2 leaves me with just y, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So that's my solution, y equals 5. So again, this is a one-step equation. All I did was I divided by the same number on both sides. Let's do one that requires multiplication. This one's going to be a little harder because it's going to look like a fraction. I'll use a different variable. Let's go m. So some number divided by 4 equals 3. Can we solve that? Some number divided by 4 is 3. What number, when you divide it by 4, gives you 3? So you might be able to think about it and come up with the answer just in your head. 12. Okay, because 12 divided by 4 equals 3. Why is it 12? Let's show it with algebra. What's the opposite of dividing by 4? Taking a number and dividing it by 4. What's the opposite of division? That would be multiplication. So the opposite of dividing a number by 4 is multiplying it by 4. So I will multiply, look how I'm writing it, the bracket. I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. Like this. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. Now on the left side, multiplying by 4 and dividing by 4 really brings you back to the original. Those two operations cancel each other out. They're opposites. And you're left with m. and 4 times 3 is 12. So that's another example of a one-step equation with fractions. Let's do a two-step equation. So in a two-step equation, there are two things to do. So for example, 2x plus 1 equals 8. Okay? We have to figure out what x is. 2 times some number, and then adding 1 gives you 8. So this one's a little harder to do in your head. You probably could think about it for a while and reason out, just try different numbers and see what x works. But let's do this with algebra. What we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing, the balance method. We're going to do the same thing to both sides until we get x alone. That's called isolating x. So what should I get rid of first, the 2 or the 1? To figure out which one of those has to go away first, we think about order of operations. If I take a number, what's happening to x here is I take this number x, I multiply it by 2, and then I'm adding 1. When we're undoing this, we're going to undo it in backwards order. It's like when you get dressed, you put on a shirt, and then you put on your jacket. When you go to get undressed, you can't take off the shirt first. You've got to take the jacket off first. So that's why the order is important. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to get rid of this 1. Okay. So the last thing we did is add the 1. So we're going to get rid of the 1 the way we did with the one-step equation, which is just subtract it away. Now, if I do it to the left side, I must also do it to the right side. Now, what happens when you add 1 and then take it away? It's like adding 0. It's like doing nothing. They cancel each other out. So I'm left with just the 2x, and 8 minus 1 is 7. Now, remember what we did with the one-step equation. 2 times some number is 7. So what's the opposite of multiplying by 2? Is dividing by 2. So I'm going to do that to both sides. And I'm left with just x equals 7 over 2. Now 7 over 2 is a fraction, and you're welcome to leave it as 7 over 2. That's really nice. If you prefer decimals, in the applied classes we are allowed to use decimals. In the academic classes we prefer to leave things as fractions. So really it's up to your teacher. If you would like to convert to decimals, it's x equals 3.5. Okay, and that's how you do your 1 and 2 step equation. So please practice and ask if you have any questions.